Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That. This is the podcast where we take topics that you can't laugh at and we prove that you can laugh at them. In our never-ending quest to prove that anything can be funny, my name is David Horning. I am your host. And you might be wondering why I don't have a comedian on this episode. Well, this is You Can't Laugh at Work. One of the things that pretty much every human being in existence has in common. We all have a job to do. We all have a role to play in society. And if we're not able to laugh at the thing that we do day in, day out, moment in, moment out, well then what's the point of living? And what I'm doing is I am separating the idea that humor in the workplace is frivolous, it's unnecessary, it can lead to lawsuits. That's not true. I mean, it can, yeah, okay. It's true in some cases. However, when done properly, humor in the workplace can lead to creative problem solving. It can lead to togetherness. It can lead to a culture that separates itself. And so in this podcast, we talk to leaders of workplaces who exhibit some of the same tendencies, the same skills, the same mindset that comedians do. Now, there's a general draw that we have toward people who are funny. Why is that? And how can we replicate that allure to get people to want to come work for us? Well, if more leaders thought like comedians, you wouldn't have that problem. And that's why this podcast exists. So stick around, hang out, and enjoy this episode with the CEO of Springbuk, based out of Indianapolis, Reasen. Enjoy. And remember that you can laugh at work. Welcome to You Can't Laugh at Work, the podcast that takes that one thing, the thing that we spend most of our waking hours doing, thinking about, stressing about, and says, no, you can laugh at that. And joining me today is the CEO and founder of Springbuk, a health intelligence software developer based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. It's Reasen. Rod, what's going on?
Hey, David. Good to be on your podcast today.
It's good to have you. So over this past year, we've experienced a lot of things where most people with a sane brain would say, "This isn't funny. There's nothing to laugh about here." Tell me, how has a sense of humor guided you through some of the challenges that you've experienced? Not necessarily just in the last couple of years, but through kind of your origin story.
Interesting. Well, my wife says I'm never allowed to tell jokes, so I was hoping to learn from you today on how to actually make this more fun, but more funny. But so I'm not allowed to tell jokes, but I will say one of the fun things that we do as a family is, and I've noticed how laughter actually changes moods, is we love watching America's Funniest Home Videos, or AFV, on Sunday nights. We get home after a long week, go to church on Sunday night, and then come home and we watch AFV. And it's just amazing how no matter what your mood is, if you're sitting there watching people fall off their stairs or, doing stupid stuff on AFV, how just the sheer laughter and being able to enjoy that together as a family changes your attitude. So I love what you do.
I remember doing that when I was a kid. I remember, I think it was Sunday night. It was Bob Saget was hosting at the time as a kid. And that was like a family tradition for us as well. So I love that. And
good. I'm glad I could bring the memory back.
Oh man, it was that. And then I think Dave Coulier hosted a show too. And it's so important, like laughing as a family, laughing together. There's nothing more powerful than being able to laugh together with people. And when I say sense of humor, and you can tell this to your wife, but a sense of humor doesn't necessarily mean you're funny. It does mean that you appreciate the funny things that happen day in or day out, and the absurd things that might not be funny. You can find a little nugget of humor within that, and that's so important, especially from a leadership standpoint. Being able to take a situation and say, "Oh, this stress or this challenge or this obstacle isn't just that. There's more to it." And that's kind of what we do as comics, because we would be so boring if there were, if there were no obstacles. So do you have an example of something you can look back on now in hindsight and kind of laugh at the time? It might not have been funny, but now you can look back at it and say, okay, there's something there.
I talk to a lot of startups that are trying to bring a brand new software up off the ground and dream it. It's coming out of their mind and they're out there trying to pitch it. And I had a call with a guy yesterday, and I remember looking back when we did our very first, what I'd call pitch to a potential customer, and we had not even put the money into an MVP. We had just barely gotten through what would basically have been a clickable PDF. And it was 7 clicks. Once you're clicking on that PDF, it looks like software, but it's just a PDF. It's a clickable PDF. And you get 7 clicks into it, and it's like, please don't ask another question because I don't have any more clicks to do. And I remember sitting in that meeting with this potential prospect, who ultimately did end up saying yes. But we were at that point, and she's like, okay, well, what's next? And we had to confess, like, well, actually, that's it. That's all we have at this point. Is that this is a demo, and this is what we're going to build. And she chuckled, and she goes, okay, well, if you can dream this and you can actually build it, then we'll be your first customer. And we all got a good laugh of just being honest, but realizing that sometimes when you're starting a software company, you're selling vaporware early on, and then it changes. The whole dynamic changes once you start to actually deliver real software, which is fun.
Is that kind of like a jump and build your wings on the way down kind of perspective?
Yeah, you've heard that analogy, I'm sure, that building a startup is like taking all the parts to an airplane and throwing you and them off a cliff and seeing how much of it you can build on your way down. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I live by that. Life's way more exciting that way.
It definitely is exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of cortisol pulsing through the veins, but it's once you get that finished product, or once you figure it out, it makes it that much more worth it. So we haven't really talked about Springbuk at all yet. I kind of just describe what you guys do as though I'm a 5-year-old.
Okay, sure. How I explain it, and we actually have a meeting this Friday, and I'm coming back to the why mission matters to our team. So at the end of the day, our software helps people by saving lives. Our mission is to prevent disease with data, which sounds much more ethereal than all the nuts and bolts and things that I'm going to get into. But at the end of the day, our mission is to prevent disease with data. And so we collect data from employers, medical claims, pharmacy, eligibility, dental, other data sets that would be at the human level, the individual employee level. And then we bring it into our storehouses, run massive amounts of algorithms, predictive models, and we suggest to an employer, here's where your biggest dollars were spent last year and where they're going to be spent next year. So as you think about the investment that you make in that human capital, that human, in regard to their healthcare or digital health solutions, wellness, and so on, here's the areas that would be the most appropriate or poignant for you to invest in. Imagine it like this. If we all buy stocks either from inside of our mutual funds or inside of our 401k or so on. And what if you could have a technology that would say, this is specifically what you should invest in the given year because this is the trend that you're facing. We don't get that as investors. But on the healthcare side of it, we have that level of data. We can predict what's going to happen in a human life based off of their existing conditions. And so we do that for employers. We help them save money.
And every year you post a list of the world of the healthiest employers out there. So there's kind of a recognition aspect to it too, to kind of inspire people to want to make sure that their workforce is healthy. What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, so the Healthiest Employer Award was actually born out of the idea that in the late 90s, early 2000s, wellness was a big topic among employers, and they were spending billions of dollars investing in new things around this idea of population health or wellness. And there were a lot of untested ideas, and there were just a lot of things that were happening. And so we said, what if we could put on a pedestal the companies that are doing remarkable or extraordinary things inside of their workforce, and they're seeing results. And so this idea came of launching an award. How else do you get people together to share what they've done really well? Is you tell them, hey, we're going to give you a prize. And it worked. Somewhat unintentionally. We weren't really trying to gather this gigantic group of people, but the award eventually grew to 42 cities. We've surveyed over 10,000 employers. 70% of the Fortune 100 have gone through the process. But that award was actually the impetus to actually start this company called Springbuk, because we came to the realization through these applications and having many, many conversations that employers really do want to make better decisions about that big, big investment that they make in healthcare. And they love having the contest to be able to see people and how they're, what others are doing.
So let's turn that inward a little bit. Recognition on an internal level. So over this past, especially this year, a lot of employees are starting to say, you know what, I don't feel like I'm recognized by, the people that I'm spending all this time, all this hard work, all this energy. I could be with my family, but I'm doing this. I'm not feeling the recognition I deserve. How does Springbuk, how do you differentiate yourselves as far as recognition goes for your own employees?
So I have a very big philosophy on this. It's something that the team knows. Culture is a big deal to us as a business. And, I think there's others that have talked about, culture eats process every day of the week. And, you still have to have good process. But in this day and age, in the age that we're in at the moment, we're doing a Zoom podcast. You probably work from that office that you're in. This is where I work from. It's above my garage. I've converted my attic into an office. And I'm in a work from anywhere situation. So is our company. That's the age that we live in. We don't live in an industrial revolution age where we're going in and punching a clock. We're just a cog, a piece of the manufacturing product, as a human being. And so what that has done is it's created this environment where employers have to understand the capacity of the human being and what their what I say is what their curiosity or where they're intellectually bent. And when you find that area where you're stimulated intellectually, you'll find yourself naturally gravitating towards reading about it, learning about it, hanging out with people that are doing it, whatever it is for you. And then you naturally want to find a role that you can become compensated for, called a job, that then marries what you love to do naturally with the problem set. And so that's how we actually stated, is that we find extraordinary people to build exceptional products. It's one of our mantras. And we find those that are passionate about a certain issue, and we have that problem in our business, and we allow a ton of autonomy to allow that human being to explore new ways, innovation, and so on. And when you unite those two, you have this explosion of new thought and idea. So we're very hands-off. I say laissez-faire, autonomous, hire great people and let them go to work, instead of the old school thumbs on you, watching you every second of the day. That doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be performance. Absolutely has to be. But allowing a culture where people can thrive because they already enjoy what they do is what we build here.
It's almost like I have a part of my presentation where I ask why, 1 out of 3 people is engaged. And then I talk about the Industrial Revolution, and people are like, what is this guy? Like, we're supposed to be learning about humor. And it's like, well, we should know where we came from. They're like, I'm sorry if I'm giving you PTSD from your high school history class, but we got to talk about this. So it's funny that you brought that up, and how the shift, how there are so many companies that are still kind of stuck in that. And then there are companies like Springbuk who are saying, no, you're a human first. How can we lean into that and get and help you, thrive on a creative and that's driven by curiosity. And that's the word that really strikes me when it comes to work, is how can we constantly have our people be perpetually curious? So that question to you, how do you continually get people to lean into their curiosity? I mean, you talked a little bit about giving them autonomy and not having your thumb on them, and that's a big part of it. But what other ways can you get people to be curious and creative?
You can't laugh at that.
Curiosity and creativity. That's what drives innovation. Creativity put into action is innovation. So many companies have the word innovation in their description, on their website, on a mural painted in their office. But what does it mean? In today's economy, we have to constantly be innovating how we recruit, innovating how we engage, innovating how we discipline, innovating how we grow on a daily, moment-to-moment basis. That's what culture is. And that's why water cooler comedy exists. Because we want to help you make work fun. Human beings are at our best when we're having fun at work. And when we're having fun at work, it doesn't mean we're playing or we're joking or goofing around. It means we are driven toward something that makes us curious. It makes us dig deeper and ask more questions. And what I've been describing this entire time is humor in the workplace. Humor is curiosity driven by questions that leads to unexpected surprises, that connects unlike thoughts or connects similar thoughts in new ways. These are skills that we are not taught in the formal education system. That if all of your employees had, you would set yourself apart from your competition. So if you want to set yourself apart from your competition, visit watercoolercomedy.org/booking. Set up a call with me today. We'll figure out if there's a fit. There are many programs that your organization could dive into, whether it's a half-day workshop, a full-day workshop, a keynote, an 8-week program. There is something in there for you, whether it's just a comedy show or something deeper. Water Cooler Comedy can lean into your audience, make your audience lean into you, and make work the time and place to laugh and innovate. Now, back to this episode with Reasen of Springbuk.
You can't laugh at that.
What other ways can you get people to be curious and creative?
Well, I bring it back to the hiring process. So when we first started a company, I used this analogy and I used my hands and I said, at Springbuk, we want this to be like this gigantic iron gate that it is, people see it from the outside, but they don't know what's going on the inside, but they want in because there's something amazing happening on the inside. And so we have to be very, very protective of who we let inside the business because they will change the culture of the company if we're not very careful and create a good immune system. So the way I like to talk about it is that I naturally, if you think about this, I don't even know you except for listening to a couple of your podcasts. But if, I could start to talk to you about whatever, and I can inspire you, even though we don't know each other that well, I can inspire you for a very short period of time. It may be through an incentivization, giving you $100. It could be something else, but just calling on the good in you to go do something good. I can inspire you for a short period of time, but I can't do that over and over again. And that's, I think, one of the problems that managers or bosses often think about is I have to continue to inspire, cast vision. Well, if you're always doing that and you don't have someone that's naturally aspirational on their own, it's going to be a very tough relationship. So we say, we're an organization, our responsibility is to help you grow. That's part of the inspiration. It's through proper planning for your growth. But if you have zero aspiration to grow on your own, it is going to be frustrating for everyone. So we try to find people that are naturally aspiring to be better at their craft, whatever that it is, again, that you're naturally curious around. And then we inspire you, and this is where good managers and leaders find people that have this natural bent, and they come alongside them and say, hey, have you thought about? And we allow them to express that curiosity in the form of trying new things, whether it be a project or new software, or we use the term polyglots an awful lot when we talk about our software engineers. So they may come in and not know Python, but at Springbuk, they're going to get to learn Python because it's one of the languages we use. So they come here because they want to be able to, express that curiosity in learning.
So say you're sitting down in an interview, like what kind of questions do you ask to see if there's that synergy?
Oh, it's so funny. I just taught a high school class, seniors in high school, about interviewing 101. And so it's all these do's and don'ts and show up on time. For anybody that's listening, that interviewing is so much about the nonverbal. It's almost more about the nonverbals than it is the verbals. So showing up on time, dressing appropriately, making eye contact, being human, not being a jerk. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and done an interview and the person was just rude. It's like, you apparently don't want this job, because being rude is not normally how you get very far in life. So there's some humor, but
yeah. It's like, I don't know if you remember those pickup books, like how to pick up girls, and you have to nag them and tell them, point out their flaws to them, and then they'll be interested in you. That's what it sounds like. Like, show up to an interview and point out their flaws. Doesn't work that
or
way.
show up an hour late or 20 minutes late, or just doing silly things. But one of my favorite questions that we ask is, if you could have dinner with someone, dead, alive, or fictional, who would it be and why? And you learn a lot about people's heroes, who they esteem as a hero, and then why they would want to have dinner with them at some point. And we've heard some really awkward ones. I won't mention any here on the phone, but names that you would not think that someone should idolize, and they mention those, and you're like, oh, interesting. On to the next candidate. So,
how about you? Who would you have dinner with?
Oh, if I could have dinner with anyone, dead, alive, or fictional, it would be Jesus.
That's a good. I mean, that's the ultimate one. We had a guest on the podcast who kind of summed up Jesus in very modern way, and it was Jesus was the be cool guy in a time where a lot of people weren't cool, and it's like, if you want to sum it up that way, fine. But as a comic, our job first and foremost is to build trust with the audience. And if you don't build trust, it's hard to approach certain topics with them and get them to want to laugh. Like, why is this guy telling me about his problems? If you're somebody on the street, you can't walk up to somebody and be like, so I'm single. Like, that's not. So you've got to build that trust. You got to build that rapport first. And, when it comes to being a leader too, that's a big part of it. If you have to deliver difficult news, or if you have to ask them to do something they might be a little bit resistant to, how do you build trust with your team? And I listened to an interview with you on another podcast, and you talked a lot about transparency. Is that your go-to when it comes to building trust, being open and honest? And if so, how do you do that?
I think this is actually something else that I talk to these high school kids about is trust. And most people naturally will grant trust, or at least some bit of trust to you, whether you're pitching in a sales presentation or an interview. They're going to grant you some trust because they've met with you. And at that point, you're either giving more trust or gaining more trust. And so it's everything you do, from how you exaggerate, which is one of the things I said, don't exaggerate. If you weren't actually the all-star on the team, don't say I was one of the all-stars. Just don't say stuff that's not true. And being consistent, I think that you'd find that the team would say that there are just certain things that ethically, morally, consistency, the vision in our business has all been the same since we founded it. So having some consistency there is something that people can lean on and say, even if they don't agree, I may not agree with the direction or the statement, but I can trust that is it's not going to change.
So Springbuk is growing quickly, and you can have all of these values in place, but when massive growth occurs, those get tested a little bit. You mentioned in the past about the importance of pausing and taking time before taking action. So with you growing at this rate, how could you still do that?
So my president and I have a 48-hour rule, and we're both. There's a personality test called Kolbe with a K, Kolbe, Kolbe, and I'm a 9 out of 10 on quick start. So I'm a get it done kind of guy. I see something, I'm going to take action pretty quickly. So because of that, I'm more naturally inclined to see a problem find a solution and be already in process of solving the problem before I've even consulted with others. And so knowing that about myself, this is just the mature Rod, is you say, okay, I see the problem. I think I know the opportunity to execute, but before I start to go solve, let me pause. So it's not that you don't take that natural bent energy of how you're created, but you're stopping to the point where you're into the execution mode and you're saying, okay, are there others talking about this? Are there others that are already acting on this? Is this the direction that we should take? Who else should I involve? So that pause is about making sure that there's unity among the team and you don't continue to create chaos by doing things that other people are assigned to go do.
Mm. It's really interesting that you say that, because one of the most valuable skills that I've learned since doing stand-up is that usually the first punchline that comes to mind is not the best punchline, even though it's natural, even though it makes you laugh. You take it on the stage and nobody laughs. And you're like, what happened? You need to explore that a little bit more. Take the time to really ask yourself the question, what does this mean? What else could this mean? Who else could I talk to about this? And so it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a very similar mindset in leadership in pausing to make decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was Winston Churchill that once said that he was being pushed on when they were going to enter World War II. And he once said, why would I make a decision at this stage when I can wait another day and get more information and have more clarity? So I'm paraphrasing, but the point was that sometimes it does make sense. There are times when an immediate action needs to take place, and leaders need to be prepared that I have to make a decision right now with maybe 30, 40% of the information, but I know enough to be directionally correct and I can iterate as I go. There are other times when the decision is not that pressing and you just have to slow down. So it's learning in the moment how fast do you actually need to make that decision. But then also, I think part of the trust is being able to make a decision, fail at that decision, and say, we made the wrong decision, and pick up and say, okay, now we need to go this way. We moved too quickly, or we made the wrong decision.
It's going back to the plane analogy, building the plane on the way down. So the ultimate goal for Springbuk, let's take this, let's bring this back to the runway. Everything's firing on all cylinders. The world is a better place because of Springbuk on a massive scale. What does that look like?
So I'll tell a quick story looking at the time here and hopefully help land this. When my oldest daughter, who's now 20, be 21 in March, she was in her teens. She started having some issues with her lymph nodes underneath her jawline, or this node right here. And it became swollen, painful. We went through multiple iterations with the physician, ear, nose, and throat doc. Ultimately to hear, we don't think it's cancer, but that's all you hear as a parent, is you hear the big C word. And ultimately the doc says, I can't figure out what's going on. Go to the drugstore next door and buy a bag of Sour Patch candies. And I've said this on other podcasts. So we did. She started eating the Sour Patch candies, and within days, the swelling began to go down and she was fine. So $2.50 or whatever it was, a couple bucks for a pack of Sour Patch candies. After 18 months worth of spending a ton of money on your deductibles and co-insurance and medicines and biopsies and other things, all to find out that it was an infected saliva gland. So I use that story because if you have anyone that's listening in your audience, all of us have heard horror stories about the wrong amputation or surgery on the wrong arm or leg or something other crazy that happens in the medical system. It shouldn't happen that way. We're in the 21st century. We can go online and push one click and have a package delivered to our house in hours. Why is our medical system so fraught with error? So what we see is a time when all of that data on you and I as human beings is married together in a much more uniform fashion. So that when you sit down with that physician and you say, this is what I'm dealing with, he or she can dip into this plethora of knowledge of organizations and people like you and find a much more appropriate procedure for you that is aligned to your best health. Our system today, our healthcare system, is not established in a way that is either syncing the data or in a way that actually is the best outcome for the human being, because we're perversely incentivizing those that are givers of care to give more care, really not even necessarily at the benefit of the human being. And so we see a world where that is cleaned up, and it's as simple as being able to know ahead of time where direction I'm taking as a human being, what can I do to avoid big disease, and then ultimately we're saving people's lives. So it is a big ethereal goal, and we're accomplishing it.
Or you just give everybody Sour Patch Kids. That's so funny. I can't believe that was it. Like, that was the answer the whole time. Oh, that's funny in itself. There it is. Rod, is there where can we find you? Where can people learn more about Springbuk?
Find me on LinkedIn, but find the business at springbuk.com, springbuk.com, named after a small African gazelle.
All right. And the final question that I leave everyone with is, what's the last time that you laughed together as a team?
You know, we were just on the phone with our executive team yesterday, and it was a rough day. Just there's a lot going on into the year, but we finally just got to the point where we were chuckling because so much was going on. So it was yesterday. So I'm glad to say that it was yesterday that we were laughing together.
All right. Make that a daily goal. Rod, thank you so much for joining this podcast and helping us prove that no matter how fast you're growing, no matter what challenges you're facing, that it is always okay to laugh at work. Thank you for listening to this episode of You Can't Laugh at Work with Rod Reasen from Springbuk. Make sure you follow You Can't Laugh at That on Facebook at You Can't Laugh at That. And then follow us on Twitter at You Can't Laugh Pod. Check out our Patreon at patreon.com/You Can't Laugh Pod. Tons of deleted scenes like we're a Marvel movie. No. It's bonus content. That's what we have. So stay on board. We got new episodes coming up on the other side of the new year. Until then, happy holidays. Get tested, wear a mask, get vaccinated, and we'll see you on the other side.